For 30 years I convinced myself I was imagining it, that the unease, the secrets, the late-night shadows weren't real. But proof has a way of showing up when you least expect it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. If this made your day easier, make mine better with a quick like and subscribe. Thank you. My husband Giorgio decided one night, over spaghetti and a half-finished bottle of wine, that our marriage needed a full-on revolution. The Spark? A podcast about radical honesty in relationships. From that moment, he declared it his new religion. We need to stop sugarcoating and start being brutally honest with each other, he announced, twirling his fork like he was about to make a TED Talk out of dinner. I looked at him and said as calmly as I could, Giorgio, we already are honest about the important stuff. But sometimes, some things are better left unsaid. In reality, our marriage only worked at all because I learned how to hold my tongue. He, of course, didn't see it that way. That's toxic positivity, he shot back, waving his hand like he was dismissing a courtroom objection. You're prioritizing comfort over authentic connection. I tried warning him gently that he's actually really sensitive and maybe full, unfiltered honesty wasn't going to feel as good as he imagined. But oh no, that set him off. Suddenly, I was infantilizing him and proving that I must already be hiding things. That was all the evidence he needed to dig his heels in. For the next 3 days, it became his entire personality. Every conversation circled back to my supposed fear of vulnerability. He started buying books on the subject, 5 of them, leaving them open around the house like some bizarre Easter egg hunt of highlighted passages. He blasted those podcasts at full volume, following me from room to room like a one-man parade of self-righteousness. By the 3rd night, he woke me up at midnight, yes, midnight, to lecture me about my red flag resistance to his new lifestyle choice. Half asleep, I finally snapped. Fine, I told him, sitting up in bed. You want brutal honesty? You've got it. He actually clapped. Clapped. Like a kid being told we were going to Disneyland. The very next morning, over toast and coffee, he asked why I'd been so quiet at his parents' anniversary dinner. Oh, Giorgio, he had no idea what door he'd just opened. Because, I said, buttering my toast calmly, your mother spent the entire night comparing me to your ex-girlfriend, the one who's now a surgeon. She doesn't know you helped her cheat her way through medical school. His fork froze halfway to his mouth. His face went slack. That was unnecessarily harsh, he muttered. I smiled sweetly. This was your idea, remember? And once I started, I couldn't stop. Also, your dad kept groping the waitress, and everyone pretended not to notice. Because that's what your family does with uncomfortable truths. He tried to cut in, but I steamrolled right through. And your brother told me at Christmas that your parents only pretend to support your business ideas because they're terrified you'll have another breakdown. You know, like when you dropped out of law school. That afternoon, his coworker Miles came over to watch the game. Giorgio, still drunk on his honesty crusade, bragged about our new radical honesty policy and how it was making us a stronger couple. Since we're doing honesty, I said, setting down a plate of chips and dip, you should probably know that Giorgio only invites you because everyone else finds him exhausting and you're too polite to say no. Miles froze mid-chip. I wasn't done. He actually thinks you're boring, but you bring good beer and you don't overstay your welcome. So really, you're the perfect guest. Miles stared at me. Giorgio laughed nervously, trying to brush it off as a joke. But I looked him dead in the eye and reminded him, radical honesty isn't about jokes. Then, for the finishing blow. And that promotion Giorgio's been bragging about? It's not a real promotion. It's a lateral move. His boss just wants him to quit without actually firing him. Miles suddenly remembered he had somewhere to be and practically ran out the door. By Thursday night, it was dinner at his parents' country club. His father launched into his usual speech about building everything from nothing and family values. Perfect opening. Funny you mention values, I said, slicing my steak. Because Giorgio spent $8,000 on OnlyFans last year. Tried to hide it under business expenses. The sound of his mother's wine glass shattering on the table could have been a gunshot. His father turned beet red while Giorgio kicked me under the table, eyes wide with panic. It was for research. He blurted. Networking for my podcast. No, it was candy, I interrupted. He was convinced she had a real connection with him. The credit card company even called me about fraud because he bought out her entire Amazon wishlist, including a hot tub. To Phoenix. The table went silent except for his mother's hyperventilating gasps. Diners at surrounding tables turned to stare. By Friday, Giorgio was done, begging me to stop. You're not being honest, he cried. You're being cruel. I tilted my head. No, Giorgio. You wanted brutal honesty. You just thought I'd tell you what you wanted to hear, that you're secretly amazing and everyone else is wrong about you. The truth is, people only tolerate you because of your parents' money and connections. That broke him. He sat there sobbing, shoulders shaking, tears splashing onto his phone screen. And that's when it buzzed with a text from his mother. Where's your father? She wrote. I held up my own phone, showing him a post I'd just seen. His father. In Miami. With his 23-year-old mistress. Shopping for cribs. Don't you think you should tell your mom the truth? I asked quietly. He snatched the phone from me, his fingers trembling as he typed out some pitiful lie about traffic on I-95. His hands shook so hard he kept hitting the wrong letters, deleting and retyping while tears rolled onto the screen. Another buzz. His mom again. If he's in traffic, why isn't he answering his own phone? Giorgio looked at me with sheer desperation, silently begging me not to blow everything up. I took the phone back and typed, let's meet for coffee tomorrow. We'll explain then. He looked like he didn't recognize me anymore, like I was some stranger who had slipped into his life and ripped it wide open. That night, he paced the living room like a man awaiting execution. At 2 in the morning, I heard him whispering on the phone to his brother, warning him what was about to come. His brother? Not even surprised. He admitted he'd known about their dad's affairs for years. That sent Giorgio spiraling again. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" He cried, over and over. By morning, he insisted he had to meet his mother alone first. "Soften the blow," he said. I let him go, but not before forwarding all the screenshots to myself. Just in case he decided protecting his father was more important than the truth. When he looked at me before walking out the door, it wasn't love or anger in his eyes. It was something colder. Like I had ripped away every illusion he'd been living under. And in that moment I realized, maybe I had. While Giorgio was off downtown meeting his mother at some cafe, I sat at our kitchen table with my laptop open and my heart pounding like a drum. 3 days of this radical honesty circus and I finally knew I was done. This wasn't just a rough patch. Something inside me had already broken. I typed divorce lawyers near me into Google. A name popped up again and again in reviews, Vicky Ridley, specializing in high-conflict divorces. Her past clients sounded eerily like me, women who'd stayed too quiet for too long. My hands were trembling as I dialed her office, but I managed to schedule an appointment for next week. Then I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the bank. I sat across from the teller, my voice steady but my stomach in knots, as I requested to open a new checking account. He helped me transfer exactly half of our joint savings into it. When I walked out with my new debit card in hand, it felt like holding the first piece of freedom I'd touched in years. 3 hours later, Giorgio came home. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in one morning, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow, face pale. Like something had died. And in a way, something had. His mother hadn't believed him at first, had accused him of inventing the affair just to hurt her. But when she demanded proof, he'd shown her the Instagram photos, her husband, Giorgio's father, picking out cribs with a woman barely older than Giorgio himself. His mother had gone silent, then walked out of the cafe without another word, heading straight to her sister's house and ignoring everyone's calls since. By lunchtime, his father was calling both of our phones nonstop. First, the voicemails were furious threats, defamation, slander, lawsuits if we didn't stop spreading lies. But then his tone shifted. He started offering money, bribes to make it all disappear, begging us to delete the evidence. Giorgio listened to each message with this hollow look, as if every word from his father carved another piece out of him. The man he'd worshipped his whole life was unraveling into something ugly right in front of him. By evening, it escalated. His father showed up at our front door, pounding so hard the walls rattled. Giorgio blocked the doorway while his father shouted insults across the lawn. The neighbors peeked through their blinds as everything spilled out, the mistress, the baby, the OnlyFans money. His father called me a manipulative witch who had poisoned Giorgio against his own blood. And for once, Giorgio defended me. They nearly came to blows before his father finally stormed off, threatening to cut Giorgio out of the will completely. Tires screeched as he drove away, leaving Giorgio shaking on the porch. That night, I booked an emergency therapy appointment with a counselor named Tess. Giorgio only agreed to go because he was desperate, clinging to the idea someone might tell him how to fix this mess. Me? I agreed because I needed answers of my own. I needed to know why I had let myself stay silent for so long. The next morning, Giorgio's coworker Miles started blowing up his phone. "Where are you? Why haven't you been to work? Is everything okay?" The messages piled up as we sat in silence at the kitchen table. Giorgio shoved his phone toward me and whispered, "Just text him I've got the flu." I stared at him. Lying isn't part of radical honesty. Remember? His jaw tightened. Then he hurled the phone against the wall so hard it exploded into pieces. The silence afterward was deafening. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. His mother. She didn't even say hello, just launched into demands. She wanted proof about the OnlyFans spending. Proof of everything I'd told her at the country club. So I pulled out my laptop, opened 3 years' worth of credit card statements and highlighted every charge. Each OnlyFans payment. Each wire transfer to Candy in Phoenix. Even the Amazon orders, including the hot tub. I scanned and emailed her the entire file while she sat on the other end of the line, breathing into the phone. When I hit send, she hung up without a word. 3 days later, we walked into Tessa's office for our first session. The waiting room was all vanilla candles and white noise machines, supposed to be soothing, but it just made my nerves worse. For the first 20 minutes, Giorgio took center stage. He painted me as this cruel, vindictive monster who had twisted honesty into a weapon to destroy his family. "She's having some kind of breakdown," he told Tess, his voice cracking with practiced sorrow. Tess didn't interrupt. She just listened. Then she asked, "Why did you want radical honesty in the first place?" He stumbled. He muttered something about podcasts, about how mature couples communicate. But when she pressed him, he had no real reason. Just, it seemed like the right thing to do. "And what does honesty mean to you?" she asked. "Truth. Building trust. Connection," he said quickly, like he'd memorized the words. "Then why," Tess asked gently, "did you only want honesty when you thought it would benefit you?" The color drained from his face. He started sputtering, denying it, but Tess stayed calm. She pointed out how he'd used the concept as a weapon first, guilting me for wanting privacy, for maintaining boundaries. She asked why he thought he could handle brutal truths when just law school stress had once broken him completely. That was it. Giorgio shot up, face crimson, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the framed certificates on the wall rattled. I just sat there, staring at the empty chair across from me. Tess gave me a small, reassuring smile. We can continue, just the two of us if you'd like. So I did. For 40 minutes I poured it all out. Things I'd never said aloud to anyone, not even myself really. The exhaustion. The constant emotional labor. The way I had to predict his moods, filter his world, keep him from exploding over the smallest criticism. The Christmas when his brother whispered to me that Giorgio had been like this his entire life. The nights I sat up until dawn calming him after tantrums. Tess nodded softly. She told me I wasn't crazy. That what I'd done might seem extreme, but it was a natural response to years of walking on eggshells. Years of swallowing truths that were eating me alive. When I left her office, I had something I hadn't felt in years. A plan. A therapist. And, for the first time in a long time, the sense that I wasn't trapped anymore. When I got back home that night, the scene was bleak. Giorgio was sprawled across the couch, passed out, surrounded by a graveyard of empty beer bottles. The landline was ringing, caller ID flashing Ari, his office manager. I answered. Is everything okay? Ari asked immediately. His voice carried more worry than judgment. Giorgio hasn't shown up in 3 days. He's not answering anyone. I forced my tone steady. He's dealing with a family emergency. Technically true, though it felt more like a family implosion. Ari hesitated, then sighed. I'm sorry to say this, but several clients have been complaining about him for months. Missed deadlines, showing up unprepared. Sometimes drunk. I thanked him, promised Giorgio would be in touch, even though deep down I knew he wouldn't. Before I could catch my breath, my phone buzzed. Instagram notification. I opened it and froze. There she was. The mistress. Smiling in Miami with a diamond on her finger so big it could blind you. The caption said yes to my forever ring, red heart, red heart, red heart. I screenshotted everything before it could vanish. Within minutes, my phone lit up again, this time with his mother's name. When I answered, all I heard was sobbing. She'd seen it too. Her voice cracked as she asked how her husband could propose to someone else while still married to her. I stayed on the line for 2 hours while she cycled through rage, grief, humiliation. How did I miss this for 30 years? She cried. I didn't have the heart to tell her she hadn't missed it at all, she just looked away. 4 days later, Giorgio finally dragged himself back to work. He returned before lunch, eyes swollen, face blotchy. He admitted he'd broken down in front of the entire team during a presentation, sobbing uncontrollably until Ari pulled him aside and suggested personal leave. The promotion he'd bragged about for months? Gone. Whispers about firing him were already spreading. That evening, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother, and I'd never heard her so furious. She told me Giorgio's father had actually called my parents, begging them to talk sense into me about destroying his family. My mother let him have it. Called him a pathetic old man who couldn't keep it in his pants, then had the audacity to blame others for the wreckage. My father got on the line and promised that if Giorgio's father ever contacted them again, he'd handle it personally. I'd never felt so proud or so supported. The next morning, as I was getting dressed, Giorgio stormed in holding a small white rectangle, Vicky's business card. The one I'd tucked in my purse. His face was purple with rage. You've been planning this the whole time, haven't you? He shouted, shaking the card like it was a weapon. Plotting to destroy me and take everything. I calmly took the card back, slipped it into my pocket and walked to the kitchen. He followed me, yelling betrayal, demanding to know how long I'd been scheming. The doorbell rang. His brother. He looked pale, worried. Their mother had called him crying over the Instagram post. Giorgio immediately launched into a rant about how I was tearing the family apart, but his brother just shook his head. This isn't the first time, Giorgio, he said quietly. Then he sat down at our table and laid it all out, 3 other women over the years. Each time their mother found out. Each time she stayed. Each time their father smoothed things over with expensive gifts. Giorgio sat frozen, mouth open, like his entire world was crumbling piece by piece. The next morning I had my solo session with Tess. I spent the whole hour unraveling threads from my childhood, how I'd always been the emotional manager, keeping the peace, smoothing things over. Tess looked at me and said, gently but firmly, that Giorgio's honesty demand was never about connection. It was about control. Just another hoop I was expected to jump through perfectly. For the first time I let myself believe her. 2 days later, the credit card company called. Suspicious activity, a $1,000 plane ticket to Phoenix. I didn't need to guess who it was for. I froze the account immediately. At lunch, when Giorgio's card was declined, he stormed home screaming that I was financially abusing him. I pulled up the attempted charge on my phone. He went silent, then mumbled excuses about Candy, just being a friend who needed help. That afternoon, his mother called again. Her voice was shaking. She asked me to come with her to confront his father downtown. She didn't want to face him alone. We drove in silence. When we walked into his office waiting room, the air went out of her lungs. Sitting there was a young blonde woman, hand resting on her very pregnant belly. His mother stopped, spine stiffening. Then she walked straight to the receptionist. My lawyer will be in touch, she said calmly before turning on her heel and leaving. She never even looked back at the pregnant woman, who blinked at us, confused, asking who we were. His mother just pressed the elevator button and walked out with her head held high. That night, Giorgio begged. He fell to his knees, crying, asking me to try couples therapy, swearing he'd do anything to fix us. I told him I'd only go if he also committed to individual therapy for his sex addiction. He snapped back instantly. I don't have an addiction. I just like adult content. That's normal. But the truth was clear. His mistress posting engagement photos now, flaunting that ring, it felt like deliberate sabotage. Like she wanted the final blow to land publicly. And Giorgio? He wasn't ready to change. He just wanted to manipulate me into staying. The following week, I sat across from Vicky in her office while she combed through our finances. She found everything. A hidden savings account with $3,000. Patterns of large cash withdrawals during business trips that probably never existed. She pieced together a trail of lies. On Tuesday, Miles stopped by to check on Giorgio. He found him drunk on the couch at 2 p.m., mumbling about everyone abandoning him. Miles tried to coax him into drinking water, but Giorgio wouldn't budge. I got home from work to find the mess and Miles pulled me aside. He admitted he'd been worried about Giorgio's drinking for a year but hadn't known how to say anything. So I told him. All of it. The addiction. The affairs. The divorce. Miles just nodded slowly, as if puzzle pieces finally clicked into place. That explains a lot, he murmured. 3 weeks later, Giorgio's mother filed for divorce. Served her husband at their country club golf game, papers handed to him in front of all his friends. Gossip spread like wildfire through their social circle. Giorgio's phone buzzed nonstop with texts from family friends demanding answers. Finally, in a rage, he hurled it against the wall and screamed that I'd destroyed his family's reputation. At our next session with Tess, she asked him again to take accountability. He twisted, deflected, blamed me. Tess was unrelenting. She kept circling him back to his own demand for radical honesty. Finally, his shoulders slumped. In a broken voice, he admitted it. He thought honesty meant I'd build him up, say nice things, while he got to feel superior for being so evolved. Tess looked him straight in the eye and told him that wasn't honesty. That was control. And once again, Giorgio wept. Meanwhile, I'd been making quiet moves. Apartment hunting. I found a one-bedroom with a doorman closer to work, with reviews that spoke of safety and peace. When I told Giorgio I planned to move out at the end of the month, he alternated between begging and rage, sobbing one moment, calling me heartless the next. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom for 5 minutes of silence. My phone buzzed with a new Facebook message request. The profile picture showed a bleached blonde woman clutching a designer purse. The preview said, "I'm his father's mistress. I need to tell my side." I opened it. 3 paragraphs about how she wasn't the only one. 2 other women were pregnant too. She wanted to make sure his wife knew everything before the lawyers circled in. I screenshotted the entire message, sent it to his mother's lawyer, then blocked her. Outside the bathroom door, Giorgio paced, calling my name, asking if I was okay. His phone rang, it was Ari. I heard Giorgio slip into his fake professional mode, but within minutes his voice cracked, stumbling over excuses. Even through the door, I could hear Ari's rising frustration. When he finally hung up, Giorgio punched the wall hard enough to leave a dent. He came storming down the hall, face twisted. "They've put me on a performance plan," he spat. "Clients are complaining. And it's your fault. All this family drama, you sabotaged me." I didn't argue. I went to the kitchen, put water on for pasta, and let him rant behind me. The next morning, I sat in Tess's office again. She leaned forward, eyes serious. She told me what I already knew in my bones, that his escalation was dangerous. That I needed to move out sooner, not later. By the end of that session, I had movers booked for the following week. For the first time in months, I felt lighter. Like I was finally stepping out of the cage I'd been holding shut myself. That afternoon, as I sat in the grocery store parking lot, his mother called. Her voice was different this time, calmer, almost steady. She thanked me. Thanked me for opening her eyes. For breaking the facade she'd been upholding for 30 years. "I always knew something was wrong," she whispered. "I just didn't want to admit it." She told me she'd started therapy herself. That watching me refuse to play along anymore had given her permission to stop pretending too. And then she said something I'll never forget, for the first time in decades. "I can breathe." We hung up and I realized we weren't just in-laws anymore. Somehow, through all this chaos, we had become allies. Maybe even friends. 2 days later, while I was answering emails, Giorgio shuffled into the kitchen clutching his phone like it was a lifeline. His eyes were swollen, breath sour with last night's whiskey. "Candy just messaged me," he said, voice shaking. "She's pregnant. She needs money for the baby." He held the screen out like it was Exhibit A, proof I'd been wrong about something. The DM was dramatic, lots of crying emojis, and attached was an ultrasound image with a crisp white border that looked suspiciously generic. I zoomed in and yep, there was the faint watermark you see on every stock photo site if you've ever typed ultrasound. "We've never even met in person," he added quickly, as if that somehow solved the math problem. "It's all been online." I looked from the photo to his face. Radical honesty includes admitting when you've been scammed. His cheeks flushed a furious red. He snatched the phone back, blocked her, then muttered to himself, "She felt so real. She was different." Our next couples session with Tess was supposed to be about communication tactics, timers, I feel statements, all the usual. Instead, Giorgio used all 50 minutes like a closing argument. He cataloged my sins with dates and timestamps, cruel, manipulative, vindictive. I'd weaponized his call for honesty and set fire to his life. Every brutal thing I'd said, every secret I'd revealed, every bridge I'd torched, he stacked them up like evidence boxes on a courtroom dolly. Tess let him run for 20 minutes, then raised a hand. "Name one moment, just one, where you took responsibility for anything that happened." Silence. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. He tried to pivot back to me. Tess brought him to the question. He tried a second time, she steered him again. Nothing. He stormed out, the door shuddering on its hinges. Tess booked me for the next day without missing a beat. By then I had already signed the lease on a small, bright one-bedroom 20 minutes away, deadbolt, security cameras, responsive landlord who actually answered emails. While Giorgio was at work trying to satisfy his performance plan, I started packing. Brown boxes I'd hidden in the garage. Bubble wrap snapping under my fingers. I was wrapping plates in yesterday's newspaper when I heard his car way too early, gravel crunch, door slam. He walked in, saw the boxes, saw me holding our wedding china wrapped in classifieds, and his face collapsed into a child's. "Please don't," he whispered, voice breaking as he trailed me from room to room. He promised 1,000 impossible things. He tried to tug the box from my hands. I sidestepped and kept packing. He called his brother, sobbing so hard he could barely breathe. An hour later, his brother pulled up with a pickup truck and a look that said he'd expected this. He took in the scene, the boxes, the begging, the neighbors pretending not to stare from their driveways, and quietly started loading. Giorgio sat on the lawn narrating his heartbreak to the street like a town crier, taking turns between wailing about betrayal and shouting that I was abandoning him in his hour of need. His brother finally turned to him and said, low and firm, "You're making this worse. Get up." When the last box slid into the truck, his brother apologized to me. "You deserved better than what you got from us," he said. Then he added, almost to himself, that he'd always known Giorgio was difficult. He just hadn't realized how bad it had become. That afternoon, the local news ran a segment, "Prominent businessman's assets frozen amid multiple paternity claims." No names, but in a town our size they didn't need to. My phone pinged. His mother sent a single laughing emoji. The first genuine joy I'd heard from her in years. She followed with, "He's at a motel. Court froze everything. 2 more women are pregnant. Both have lawyers." A week into my new apartment, Ari called. Giorgio had missed an important client meeting, the third strike. "Do you know where he is?" he asked, voice brittle with fatigue. I gave Ari his brother's number and told him I wasn't Giorgio's emergency contact anymore. When I hung up, it felt like setting down a 1,000-pound weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying everywhere. That first night alone, my phone began buzzing around midnight, again and again until the screen glowed like a beacon. 43 voicemails. I put the phone on speaker and made tea. The first few messages were messy crying, apologies, promises to change. Then it turned sharp, accusations, jealousy, imagined lovers. Message 32, threats to hurt himself if I didn't call back. The last 11 were just my name, over and over, broken like a prayer. I forwarded every one of them to Vicky with a note. Would this help with a restraining order? Her text came back immediately, absolutely. Keep documenting. Around 2 a.m., Miles texted to ask if I was awake. Giorgio had shown up at his door with a suitcase and wouldn't leave. He'd plowed through half of Miles's liquor cabinet and was now looping through a nostalgia slideshow of our photos. Should I be worried he'll do something stupid? Miles asked. I told him yes, if Giorgio threatened to hurt himself or anyone else, to call 911 right away. 3 days later, his mother asked me to lunch to celebrate. I barely recognized her at the downtown bistro, sleek haircut, clothes that fit her like she'd finally remembered she had a body. She ordered champagne and clinked my glass. "I filed this morning," she said, smiling like the sun had come back. Her lawyer expected half of everything plus alimony. Hidden accounts were already turning up like seashells at low tide. She'd enrolled in salsa, booked a trip to Greece with her sister. "To radical honesty," she said, raising her flute. Finally doing something useful. That afternoon in Tessa's office I broke. The guilt came in waves. Had I blown up an entire family just to prove a point? Tess passed me tissues, her voice steady. The affairs existed before I spoke them aloud. The money was already flowing to Candy before I highlighted it. The foundation rotted long before I knocked. "Silence doesn't solve rot," she said. "It just lets it grow in the dark." 2 days later, Giorgio's brother called me at work. Giorgio had been fired after showing up drunk and screaming at Ari in front of clients. Security escorted him out while he shouted about betrayal. "He might come to your place," his brother warned. I drove straight to the hardware store. Bought an extra deadbolt, a door bar, a camera that sent live video to my phone. I installed everything myself that night, metal on metal, the bolts biting into the frame. Sleep, when it came, was shallow and brittle. At 3 a.m. Saturday, the pounding started. He was outside my door, slurring my name, rattling the handle. I watched him sway on the camera and called 911, staying on the line as he kept yelling that I had destroyed his life and the police should arrest me. Officers arrived in under 10 minutes. I watched them on the feed, calm voices, hands open. They served the temporary restraining order I'd already filed. He argued, then finally sagged as they led him away. Monday, Vicky filed the divorce officially, fault marked on Giorgio's side for financial deception and addiction. A judge signed a temporary order, 500 feet from me and my office. That night, I slept 8 uninterrupted hours. No buzzing phone. No listening for keys in the door. Just quiet. The family saga rolled on without me. His father's mistress gave birth and immediately filed for child support. Then 2 more babies arrived within days. Court-ordered DNA tests came back triple positive. His mother sent a photo from Italy, her in front of the Colosseum, sunglasses on, wine glass raised, funded by money her lawyer had pried out of offshore accounts. In therapy, a deeper truth surfaced. I had been managing difficult men since childhood. An alcoholic father taught me to swallow words and tiptoe around moods. I married a man who felt familiar, who needed the same curation of reality to stay calm. I'd been performing triage on other people's emotions for so long that I thought it was love. It wasn't. It was survival. 2 months into the chaos, his brother delivered an ultimatum: rehab or lose the family support forever. Giorgio chose rehab, sex addiction and alcohol. A few weeks in, a letter arrived, 5 pages of explanations and 0 ownership. He wanted forgiveness without confession. I dropped it in the trash and felt nothing but relief. 3 months later, I sat in the courthouse while Vicky leafed through final exhibits. The judge reviewed bank records, the TRO violations, the documented addictions. He ruled cleanly in my favor. I kept the house, most of our savings, and 3 years of alimony. Giorgio appeared via video from rehab, eyes down, nodding when asked if he understood. Vicky shook my hand afterward and said it was the simplest judgment she'd seen in years because the facts were so stark. That weekend, Miles asked to meet. He sat across from me at a cafe, hands wrapped around his mug like it might steady him. He apologized for staying quiet, admitted he'd seen Giorgio's decline for a year and didn't know how to intervene. He introduced me to his sister later that week. She'd survived a similar marriage. Once a month, the 3 of us met for lunch. It felt like finding a small raft after a long swim. Giorgio's mother called one evening laughing, light girlish. She'd started seeing someone from Salsa, a man named Robert who brought her flowers every Friday. That honesty disaster, she joked, was the best thing that ever happened to me. At 6 months post-divorce, I was waiting for a latte when someone said my name. Candy. Without the filters and stage makeup, she looked human. Tired. Younger. Older. She told me she was in therapy, that she'd scammed dozens of men the same way, that she was sorry for being part of the wreckage. We talked for 20 minutes. I believed her remorse, not as absolution, but as a beginning. A year after the explosion, I met someone at book club who made me laugh without trying. We were boringly honest in ordinary ways. I'm tired, your playlist gives me a headache, let's order pizza and not talk about feelings tonight. It was blissful not to manage anyone's storms. 14 months after the papers were stamped, Giorgio asked to meet and make amends as part of his program. We picked a coffee shop near his brother's office, neutral ground. He looked softer. He took responsibility without buts or ifs. Therapy had shown him the bottomless pit he'd been trying to fill with attention, fantasy, validation. He said the country club still traded stories about his parents' nuclear divorce. His father was drowning under 4 child support orders for babies born within 6 months of each other. His mother had bought a beach house and was hosting dinner parties for divorced women, sending me photos of sunsets and champagne toasts labeled freedom. Sometimes, late at night in my quiet apartment, I think about the irony. Giorgio demanded radical honesty, expecting romance movie magic, 2 souls evolved by truth. Instead, honesty unstitched every fantasy his family had been living in. His mother stepped into her life. I stepped into mine. Even he, dragged and bleeding, finally stepped in to help. The truth didn't stitch us together, it showed us where we didn't fit. It didn't save a perfect marriage, it revealed there had never been one, only me endlessly smoothing the surface. And yet here I am. No more performing. No more managing. Just a life that fits. The greatest gift Giorgio ever gave me wasn't love or loyalty. It was permission to stop pretending and to live, finally, as myself. For months I let everyone believe I was fine, but the truth is darker than they know. I carried a secret through my pregnancy, and the father of my child still doesn't know what I did. If this made your day easier, make mine better with a quick like and subscribe. Thank you. When my boyfriend called me disgusting at our own baby shower, something in me snapped. That was the exact moment I decided I wouldn't tell him another thing about my pregnancy. Not the milestones, not the complications, not even when I went into labor. Jerry and I had been together for 4 years, and that shower was supposed to be this beautiful, celebratory moment. He'd chosen this fancy country club, his dream venue, not mine. The chandeliers were glittering, the tablecloths stiff and white, champagne glasses clinking. I was already nervous, but I plastered on a smile. Then my cousin leaned in and asked, "Hey, why are your eyes so red?" I laughed softly, embarrassed but honest. "Oh, this morning I threw up so hard I burst the blood vessels in my eyes." Before anyone else could react, Jerry's voice cut through the room like a whip. "Shut up. Nobody wants to hear about your bloody eyes and vomit. Can't you just be pregnant without making it everyone else's problem? It's revolting." The whole room froze. Forks clinked against plates. Even the waiter stopped moving. His sister tried to speak up, whispering, "Jerry," but he doubled down. "What? Am I supposed to pretend it isn't gross? Yesterday she went on about her nipples leaking. Last week it was her discharge and cellulite. We get it. You're pregnant. Your body's doing nasty things." I'll never forget his mother gasping, "Jerry, she's carrying your child." He just shrugged, irritated. "That doesn't mean I need to hear every disgusting thing happening to her. This is supposed to be a happy day and she's killing my appetite." My hands were trembling as I set down my glass. And then I looked him dead in the eyes. "You know what? You're absolutely right. I won't disgust you with another update, Jerry." He blinked, surprised at first, then smug. "Finally. Thank you. See? Not that hard to keep private." And that was it. I shut down. 2 days later, he caught me pulling on my shoes, getting ready for my 20-week anatomy scan. "What time's the appointment?" "I'll drive." I smiled thinly. "Oh, I'm going alone. I wouldn't want to subject you to disgusting pregnancy stuff." His face twisted like he couldn't process it. "But we find out if it's a boy or girl today." "Exactly," I said. "Which means a tech will smear cold gel on my stomach, press a wand into me, and will stare at our baby's private parts on a screen while they measure organs. Pretty gross, right?" "That's different," he argued. "No, it's not. You said pregnancy details revolt you. I'm respecting that." And with that, I ordered an Uber. He tried following me, but when he showed up at the clinic, I made him wait outside. The very next day his mother called him crying tears of joy. "It's a boy. He's perfect. And Jerry, you'd better have apologized to her by now." He stormed into our room furious. "You said the doctor wouldn't know the gender yet?" I shrugged. "I only said that to avoid disgusting you. Didn't want to ruin your appetite." "You can't keep that from me." "I'm not keeping anything," I shot back. "I'm protecting you from all that revolting pregnancy talk. Just like you asked." When friends asked about names, I lit up with excitement, just not with him. Everyone else knew the options: James, Thomas, William. But not Jerry. "Why won't you tell me the names you're considering?" he demanded one night. "Because discussing baby names means talking about the pregnancy. And that's off limits. Your rules, remember?" He thought I was insane. But really, I was just giving him exactly what he wanted. At 28 weeks, things got scary. My feet swelled so much they left dents like memory foam, and black spots clouded my vision. I went to the hospital alone. They diagnosed me with preeclampsia and admitted me. I texted my family, his family, even our friends. Everyone except Jerry. He only found out when his brother called asking why he wasn't there. "You're in the hospital? And you didn't tell me?" Jerry demanded. I looked at him coldly. "Medical details about pregnancy are TMI, remember? You said so yourself." What if you looked at me, called me disgusting again? The stress could have made me lose the baby. For once, he went silent. At 36 weeks, the doctors scheduled a C-section. And again, I told everyone except Jerry. His sister ended up breaking the news. Jerry called me, panicked. "Tuesday? You're having our son on Tuesday?" "Yep. Didn't want to disgust you with the part about cutting through my abdomen layers and pulling a baby out of my uterus. I need to request time off." "Why?" I snapped. "You don't want to see gross pregnancy stuff. And birth? That's the ultimate pregnancy update. Blood, amniotic fluid, the placenta. You hate all that, remember?" At dinner, his mom begged me to let him come. Jerry sat across from me, practically in tears. "I know I messed up. I'm sorry. But I need to be there." I just shrugged. "You said every disgusting thing happening to me. Well, birth is exactly that." The morning of my C-section, I quietly called an Uber while Jerry showered. As they prepped me for surgery, I texted him, "Having the baby now. Don't want to disgust you with the details. Talk later." When I woke up, Jerry was already in the room, wild-eyed. "You didn't tell me you were leaving. This is the problem." I stared at him, numb. "Jerry, I just came out of life-threatening surgery. I just had our son. And your first words are about you." He went pale. I missed my son's first moments." "It's fine," I said coldly. "I'm sure it was all revolting anyway." The nurse, who knew everything, shot him a look of pure contempt. "Oh, so you're the father who thinks pregnancy is gross. Never had one of those before." Jerry sank into a chair, then bolted for the door. I called his name twice, but he didn't stop. The door slammed shut, leaving me alone in that sterile room, machines beeping around me. The nurse muttered under her breath, adjusting my four. Something about men who dish it out but can't take it. I tried to sit up, but the pain sliced through me like fire. She helped me shift, but all I could do was stare at that empty doorway. 20 minutes later, they wheeled in the bassinet. My son, wrapped in a striped blue and white blanket, face scrunched up like a tiny old man. His little fingers twitched, grasping at air. As I cradled him against my chest, my phone buzzed. Jerry's mom. Her voice was frantic. "Why is Jerry at my house sobbing and refusing to tell me what happened?" I swallowed hard, staring down at the tiny life in my arms. "Because," I said flatly, "he walked out right after I woke up from surgery." The line went silent. Then, in a trembling voice, she whispered, "I'm on my way." And I sat there, clutching my baby, waiting, wondering what Jerry's mother would say when she saw it for herself. About an hour later, I heard a soft knock at the door. A woman with a clipboard stepped inside, introduced herself as a hospital social worker, and pulled up a chair right next to my bed. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, as she started asking questions. Did I feel safe at home? Did I have people I could count on once I left the hospital? I swallowed hard and started from the very beginning. The baby shower, Jerry calling me disgusting in front of everyone, the way he sneered at every symptom I shared. I told her how I'd kept him out of appointments, how he missed the birth because I couldn't trust him not to belittle me in the middle of surgery. She listened quietly, pen scratching against her clipboard, only nodding now and then. Finally, she looked me in the eye and said, "Emotional abuse during pregnancy is serious. We need to make sure you and your baby have the support you deserve." Her words hit me like a weight off my chest. Someone was finally saying it out loud. Just then, the door opened again. Jerry's mom rushed in, eyes already brimming with tears. The second she saw her grandson in my arms, she broke down. She reached out, trembling, and brushed her fingers against his tiny hand. Then she looked at me, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Jerry told me everything," she whispered. "What he said, what he did. I'm disgusted with my own son." I held her gaze for a moment before she asked, almost pleading, "Can I still be part of his life? Even if you and Jerry don't work out?" Without hesitation, I placed the baby in her arms. "Of course. You're his grandmother." The social worker made another note and said she'd check back tomorrow. And then it was just us, me, my baby, and Jerry's mom holding him like he was the most precious thing she'd ever seen. The second day in the hospital, my phone turned into a weapon. Buzz after buzz after buzz, Jerry. First, he was apologizing, begging to see the baby. Then he was furious, accusing me of keeping his son from him. 5 minutes later, back to desperate promises, "I'll change. I'll do anything. Please." The messages poured in, frantic and relentless, switching from love bombing to rage and back again. My chest felt tight every time the screen lit up. Finally, the nurse noticed the stress etched across my face. She took my phone gently from my hands, showed me how to turn on Do Not Disturb, only allowing emergency calls. "You need to heal," she said firmly. "Not deal with his drama." Before I could leave the hospital, the staff told me they couldn't discharge me until they confirmed I had safe housing and someone to help me. I couldn't even lift anything heavier than my baby, let alone climb stairs or cook for myself. That's when Jerry's sister called. She offered to stay with me for the first week to help me recover. And she made it clear, Jerry would be staying at their mom's house, so I wouldn't have to see him. Relief washed over me. I said yes. On discharge day, I was signing papers when the phone at the nurse's station rang. Security. Jerry was downstairs with flowers, trying to come up. But his name wasn't on my approved list. "Do you want him allowed in?" the nurse asked. I didn't even hesitate. No. So he left the flowers at the desk with a note. The nurse handed it to me, but I didn't even look at it, just shoved it in my discharge folder with the rest of the paperwork. Jerry's sister pulled up to take me home. I sat in the back with my son strapped in his tiny car seat, staring at him the whole ride while my stomach incision ached with every bump in the road. Walking back into the house felt eerie, like I was stepping into someone else's life. The nursery Jerry and I had painted together was perfect, soft colors, matching furniture, a little mobile over the crib. But the air felt hollow. Like all the warmth had been drained out. Jerry's sister helped me up the stairs, steadying me as I clutched the banister, every step sending fire through my abdomen. She'd already stocked the fridge, unpacked in the guest room. She was ready to move in, ready to help. And Jerry? He was across town, hiding at his mother's house. Running. The days blurred together. Pain radiated through my body, I could barely walk to the bathroom. And then my milk came in. Day 3. My chest was swollen, hard, burning. I sat on the edge of the bed, tears streaming down my face as I tried to pump through the pain. Buzz. 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 My phone again. Jerry. Can I come see the baby? Please. I'll only stay a few minutes. I stared at the message, fingers trembling, and finally typed back, I need to focus on healing. I'll contact you when I'm ready. Seconds later, more messages. 5 in a row. I didn't read them. Just swiped them away and deleted the notifications. 2 days later, it was time for the baby's first pediatrician appointment. His name was on the insurance, so I had no choice but to text him the date and time. I kept it cold, factual, just the details, nothing about how the baby was doing or how badly my body hurt. Within minutes, he replied, Can I come? Can I drive you? I told him no, that his sister was taking us. He kept texting anyway, paragraphs of begging, promises, guilt trips. I turned off read receipts and ignored every message that wasn't strictly necessary. At the appointment, the waiting room buzzed with the sound of crying newborns and exhausted parents. I balanced paperwork on my knee with one hand while cradling my son with the other. When we were called back, the nurse weighed him, measured him, and the doctor started asking about family medical history. She looked at me gently. We'll need information from the father's side too. I froze. As much as I wanted to shut him out completely, I couldn't erase his existence from our son's medical chart. So I texted him. Need your family's health history. His reply came instantly, paragraphs of information, every condition, every allergy. And then, of course, I can come to future appointments. Just say the word. The doctor noticed my hands shaking as I typed. She glanced at me, concern in her eyes. Do you have support at home? I swallowed hard and told her the truth. She handed me a stack of pamphlets, single-parent resources, postpartum groups, phone numbers I could call in the middle of the night if things got overwhelming. That evening back home, Jerry's mom called. She didn't ask about Jerry, didn't press me about forgiving. She just asked, Can I come help with the night feed? At 9 o'clock sharp, she arrived with her overnight bag. At 3 in the morning, she was the one rocking my baby, feeding him, while I finally closed my eyes. She never once brought up Jerry, unless I did first. All she focused on was the baby, the bottles, the laundry. And for the first time in days, I felt something close to peace. On my 5th day home, I finally pulled out the envelope tucked between my hospital papers, the one Jerry left with the flowers. I hadn't wanted to look, but curiosity gnawed at me. Inside was a letter, 3 pages long. His handwriting was messy, rushed, almost desperate. He admitted everything. He said he was ashamed of how he treated me at the shower, ashamed of calling my pregnancy disgusting, when I was literally growing his child. He wrote about failing me as a partner, about abandoning me when I needed him most. For a moment, I just sat there staring at the words. Then I folded the letter back up and shoved it into the drawer with my discharge papers. Because at that point, words didn't matter. Actions did. Later that day, Jerry's sister was changing the baby on the nursery table when she casually mentioned something that made me stop in my tracks. Jerry had started seeing a therapist. Twice a week. I froze. Jerry? Therapy? This was the same man who used to laugh and say therapy was for weak people who couldn't handle life on their own. But his sister explained he didn't have a choice. Their mom made it a condition of him staying at her house. She even paid for the sessions herself to make sure he went. I didn't know what to feel, shock, maybe a flicker of hope, but I quickly pushed it down. Therapy or not, my incision was still healing and I had a newborn to care for. Jerry's choices didn't erase the pain he caused. 3 days later, I woke up drenched in sweat, my skin burning. The thermometer blinked back at me, 101 degrees. My heart sank. Infection. I called my doctor in a panic, and Jerry's mom rushed me to urgent care while his sister stayed behind with the baby. Sitting in that waiting room, every heartbeat pulsed painfully through my incision. The doctor examined me, found a small infection where one stitch hadn't dissolved properly, and started me on antibiotics. She also asked about my stress levels, warning me that too much stress could slow my recovery. My voice cracked as I admitted things were complicated at home with the baby's father. She gave me a referral for a therapist who specialized in postpartum issues and relationship trauma. It felt like she saw right through me. Within 2 days, the fever broke, but the exhaustion, the weight of it all, lingered. 2 weeks after giving birth, Jerry's sister handed me another envelope. This one thick, neatly typed, clearly crafted with help from his therapist. Inside was a formal letter requesting a mediated discussion about co-parenting. It used words like accountability, repair, and taking responsibility for harmful behaviors. It didn't sound like Jerry at all. I set it aside and called a family law office instead. I wasn't about to walk blind into mediation without knowing my rights. Climbing the stairs to that law office on the 3rd floor nearly broke me. I had to stop twice to catch my breath, clutching my healing stomach. But when I finally sat across from the lawyer, I spilled everything. From the baby shower humiliation to him walking out of the hospital room, to the way he kept demanding updates while accusing me of shutting him out. She scribbled notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen moving faster the more I talked. Then she looked up at me and said, "His behavior? That's emotional abuse. And the fact that he abandoned you during birth? That will absolutely factor into custody." She helped me build a timeline, every cruel comment, every absence, every message. We printed out screenshots of his texts and organized them by date into a thick folder. Seeing it laid out like that was jarring. A clear pattern of neglect, blame, and manipulation. By the end, she told me I had strong grounds for primary custody, maybe even supervised visitation if I wanted. She explained the difference between joint and sole legal custody, how physical custody schedules worked for breastfeeding newborns. 2 hours later, I walked out knowing my rights. And for the first time, I felt like I had power again. I texted Jerry's sister, telling her I'd meet with him and a mediator once I was 4 weeks postpartum, when I could physically handle sitting for an hour. Jerry immediately started blowing up my phone. "Can we meet sooner? Please. I'll do anything." I ignored him. Forwarded everything straight to my lawyer. Then I picked up my baby and fed him, because that was what actually mattered. Jerry's mom kept coming over 3 nights a week, helping with night feedings. She never pressured me to forgive her son. Never guilt-tripped me. She just cooked meals, held the baby while I showered, folded laundry one-handed while I nursed. She felt less like my mother-in-law and more like my own mom. The days blurred into feedings and diaper changes. Slowly, my body started to heal. One afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was Jerry's brother. He asked if he could meet his nephew. Alone. "No, Jerry." I appreciated the respect in that. So the next day, he showed up with a stuffed elephant. He cradled the baby so carefully, like he was holding glass. He told me Jerry talked about the baby constantly at work, but admitted he knew he'd messed up. He didn't make excuses. Didn't push me. Just focused on being a good uncle, snapping photos like he was already proud. After he left, my cousin, the same one from the baby shower, arrived with 2 bags of groceries. She put everything away, then sat with me while I nursed. She reminded me of the strength it took to stand up to Jerry at the shower, when I was already so vulnerable. "Most people would have just cried," she said. "But you? You protected yourself and your baby." Her words sank deep. By the 3rd week, I started pumping so others could help with feedings. Naturally, Jerry's mom took the dreaded 3 a.m. shift, rocking the baby while I got a few precious hours of sleep. One night, as she washed bottles, she mentioned Jerry had asked about the feeding schedule. But she told him gently, firmly, that's for her to share when she's ready. She never crossed my boundaries. Never pushed me. At 4 weeks postpartum, I finally went to see the therapist the pediatrician referred me to. I sat on that couch and sobbed for almost the entire hour. I told her this wasn't the motherhood I imagined. I thought I'd have a partner beside me for the sleepless nights, the appointments, the milestones. Instead, I was doing it alone, with his family filling in the cracks he'd left. The therapist listened. She told me my grief was real, that I wasn't just mourning a broken relationship, but the partner I thought I had. She said my anger, my sadness, my overwhelm, they were all normal. And she reminded me that Jerry's cruelty wasn't just mean words. It was emotional abuse. Abuse that put me and my baby at risk. When I got home from that session, Jerry's sister was waiting with another envelope. Inside were photos of a certificate. Proof that Jerry had enrolled in a 12-week parenting program. For a brief second, something cracked inside me. Maybe he was really trying. Maybe. But then the memory hit me, his voice echoing in that country club. Your body is doing nasty things. You're revolting. The certificate slipped from my fingers and went straight into the folder my lawyer had started. Evidence. Nothing more. Because until Jerry proved otherwise, all I had were words. 2 more weeks passed in the same blur. Feedings, diaper changes, long nights with Jerry's mom rocking the baby at 3 a.m. while I tried to rest. My body was still healing, and when the mediation date we'd originally set for 4 weeks postpartum came around, I still couldn't sit through an hour-long meeting. We pushed it back to 6 weeks. Finally, that day came. I drove myself downtown to the mediator's office, nerves twisting in my stomach the whole way. Jerry was already there when I walked in. And honestly, he looked rough. His clothes hung loose on him, dark circles etched deep under his eyes, like he hadn't been sleeping or eating. It was jarring to see him like that, especially after weeks of his mother and sister stepping in to fill every gap he left behind. I couldn't help but wonder what they really thought of him. Did they resent his absence as much as I did? Or were they quietly hoping he'd grow into the role he'd abandoned? When we sat down, Jerry opened his mouth to speak first, but the mediator stopped him. You need to listen before you respond. So I started. I told them how that baby shower had destroyed something inside me, how his public humiliation made me feel worthless and disgusting for experiencing normal pregnancy symptoms. I described the morning I threw up so hard my eye vessels burst, and how instead of concern, he sneered and called it revolting. I told them about going to the hospital alone with preeclampsia, terrified for my baby, because I couldn't trust him not to look at my swollen feet and vision problems and call me gross. I said the words out loud. I couldn't trust him with my medical care, because he made it clear my pregnant body disgusted him. For once, Jerry sat there and actually listened. No interruptions. No excuses. Just quiet. When I finished, the mediator turned to him. Do you want to respond? Jerry's voice shook. He apologized. No excuses, no deflection. He admitted he was selfish, cruel, that he let his personal discomfort override basic compassion for the person he claimed to love. He said he understood now that pregnancy was hard and terrifying, and he'd made it worse by shaming me. He admitted flat out that he failed me when I needed him most. The mediator pressed him. What specific changes are you making? That's when Jerry pulled out a notebook. He laid out therapy sessions twice a week with a counselor who specialized in emotional abuse recovery. He showed receipts for parenting classes he'd already been attending for 3 weeks. He even pulled out a stack of books, pregnancy, trauma, postpartum recovery, dog-eared and highlighted. He said, I know words mean nothing. I can't undo what I did. I'm not asking for forgiveness or even unsupervised visits. All I want is a chance to show I can change. And I'll prove it through actions, not promises. I stared at him, trying to process the fact that he sounded like a completely different person. The mediator guided us into building a framework, supervised visits, 1 hour twice a week at his mom's house. Jerry nodded without a fight, writing it all down in his notebook. I was almost stunned by the lack of pushback. We worked out details, pickup times, supplies he needed ready. I listed formula brands, diaper sizes, emergency numbers. He snapped photos of everything with his phone. His mom agreed to supervise and send me updates, which eased some of the knot in my chest. The first visit was set for the following week, when I'd be 5 weeks postpartum. That morning, my nerves were shot. I packed and repacked the diaper bag 3 times, wrote out feeding instructions, even though Jerry's mom had raised 2 kids already. When I handed my baby over at her front door, my hands were shaking so badly she had to steady them. Jerry was sitting on the couch, looking like he might break in half. His mom took the baby gently and I left, heart hammering, parking my car just down the street. For the entire hour, I stared at my phone. Every buzz made me jump. His mom sent photos, Jerry holding the baby with both hands, supporting his head perfectly. Another of Jerry gazing down at him with this stunned expression, half awe, half terror. The baby looked peaceful, asleep in his arms. When the hour was up, I walked back inside. Jerry handed the baby back immediately. No comments, no asking for more time. Just silence. The second visit went the same. By the third, I finally managed to drive all the way home instead of lurking in my car like a nervous wreck. After 3 successful visits, Jerry, through the mediator, asked if we could extend the time. I thought about it for 2 days, then agreed to increase to 2 hours. But the supervision stayed until he finished his programs. Jerry didn't argue. He accepted every condition. At my 6-week postpartum checkup, I finally felt physically stronger. The doctor examined my incision, it had healed well. She cleared me for exercise, but when she asked how I was doing emotionally, I told her the truth. Co-parenting with someone who'd hurt me so deeply was harder than surgery recovery ever could be. She handed me resources for support groups and reminded me, take care of your mind too. That afternoon, Jerry's sister stopped by with groceries. While unpacking, she told me Jerry hadn't missed a single therapy session. Not one. He'd even started journaling his feelings. I almost laughed at the absurdity. This was the man who used to mock journaling as whiny. But she said he seemed committed. Really trying to understand why he'd been so cruel. She didn't tell me to forgive him. She didn't push. She just wanted me to know. 2 weeks later, when the baby turned 2 months old, Jerry sent another request, through the mediator, not directly. He asked to attend the next pediatrician appointment. I sat with that for a long time. Finally, I agreed, but with clear boundaries. He could listen, take notes, ask respectful questions. But I made all final decisions. The mediator relayed my terms and Jerry accepted immediately. At the appointment, I checked in early. Jerry slipped in quietly, sat in the corner chair instead of next to me. When the doctor came in, she treated us like any other parents. Jerry asked questions about milestones, wrote down vaccination schedules, nodded thoughtfully. He never once undermined me or made a single snide comment. At the end, the pediatrician smiled and said, "You two seem to be co-parenting well." The words nearly knocked the breath out of me. If only she knew. Afterward, Jerry thanked me softly for letting him come and left. No lingering, no overstepping. Just gone. Later that week, Jerry's mom came over to help with laundry. As she folded tiny onesies, she told me something I never expected. I failed Jerry, she admitted. I never taught him how to respect women. I made excuses for his behavior over and over. And now I see how much damage that caused. Watching you hold your boundaries, it's teaching me things I should have learned years ago. I'm sorry. I should have stepped in sooner. Her words cut deep. They didn't erase what had happened, but they mattered. For the first time, I realized even she was reckoning with the mess her son had created. And maybe, just maybe, Jerry was too. As the weeks rolled by, something unexpected happened. I started feeling stronger. More confident. I realized Jerry's absence in those early brutal weeks had actually forced me to trust myself. There was no one around to argue with me about whether I should let the baby cry it out, or to second-guess my decision to breastfeed. Every choice, every instinct, it was mine. And when I looked at my son thriving, hitting every milestone, it was proof. I was doing something right. When the baby was 10 weeks old, a message came through the mediator. Jerry had completed his first month of parenting classes, and he wanted to share what he'd learned. But instead of meeting face-to-face, I told him, put it in writing. 2 days later, a thick packet showed up. 12 typed pages. My jaw dropped. He'd gone through everything. Secure attachment, developmental milestones, how stress hormones from pregnancy trauma affect both mother and baby long-term. And then he took it further. He'd actually listed out every cruel thing he said to me during my pregnancy. Each comment, each moment, broken down with research and timestamps. The baby shower humiliation had its own page. He explained how public shaming during pregnancy could cause lasting psychological scars. The anatomy scan, he wrote about how excluding fathers from gender reveals could damage bonding, something he admitted he had already destroyed. And then came the preeclampsia section. That one made me sit down. He'd printed medical studies, highlighted mortality rates, cited statistics about women who died from it. And suddenly it hit him, really hit him, that I could have died. Alone. In a hospital. While he was at home sulking about not being included. 2 days later, I was in therapy, pacing the room, clutching those papers in my hands. My therapist watched me and finally asked, "Is holding on to this anger worth the toll it's taking on you?" I broke down. I cried about how unfair it all was. That I had to be the bigger person. That I had to hold it together, even after being humiliated and abandoned. She reminded me, co-parenting wasn't about punishing Jerry. It was about our son. Her words hurt. Because I knew she was right. 3 months postpartum crept up faster than I expected. The mediator suggested expanding visits to include 1 unsupervised hour. My stomach flipped at the thought, but Jerry had gone 8 full weeks of supervised visits without a single issue. We picked a coffee shop. Big windows. Neutral ground. I parked right outside, close enough to see through the glass. My hands shook as I handed Jerry the baby carrier. His fingers trembled when he took it too. I sat in my car for the entire 60 minutes, crying so hard at times I couldn't see the clock. Every few minutes I glanced inside. Jerry was carefully feeding the baby a bottle, walking him around when he fussed. At exactly 1 hour, my phone buzzed. Jerry was outside waiting. He thanked me 3 times. Waited until I buckled the baby in before walking away. That night, a photo came through. Our son asleep on Jerry's chest. The message read, "Thank you for trusting me." Something shifted inside me. Not forgiveness, but the first tiny crack in the wall I'd built. The next morning, Jerry's mom came over with groceries. As she unpacked, she mentioned finding medical textbooks spread all over Jerry's apartment, preeclampsia, C-sections, postpartum complications. She said he'd been studying what my body went through. And when he read about HELLP syndrome, he cried. He couldn't believe I'd survived all of that without him. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about all of this was a little too perfect. The therapy receipts. The notebooks. The medical research. The parenting classes. It felt like Jerry was checking every box on a list. Was it genuine change? Or just a performance designed to win his way back in? Through the mediator, Jerry's therapist suggested a parallel parenting activity. Something neutral where we could both show up for our son without having to interact much with each other. A baby swim class at the community center. I agreed. We showed up separately, stayed on opposite ends of the locker room, and entered the pool from different sides. The instructor treated us like any other parents. The second the baby's toes hit the water, he squealed with joy, kicking his little legs like he'd just discovered flying. Other parents smiled. I caught Jerry grinning too when our son splashed himself in the face and giggled. For 30 minutes, we weren't enemies. We weren't fighting. We were just parents keeping our baby safe in the water. And when it was over, our son fell asleep instantly, worn out from the excitement. For once, the awkwardness felt worth it. For months postpartum, another letter arrived. This one from Jerry's parenting program instructor. She wrote that in 15 years of teaching, she'd never had a student more engaged. She said Jerry asked thoughtful questions, stayed after class helping other dads, and showed genuine remorse. She said, in her professional opinion, his dedication to breaking toxic patterns was authentic. She even enclosed his final presentation. The title? Accountability and the Harm of Toxic Masculinity During Pregnancy. The custody agreement meeting came next. We sat in a lawyer's office, both of us with attorneys present. Jerry didn't fight me. Not once. He signed everything. Primary custody went to me, gradually increasing visitation rights for him. He agreed to continue therapy for a year minimum, to comply with any additional court requirements. When child support was calculated, Jerry shocked everyone by agreeing to pay 20% above the number. His lawyer explained Jerry had already taken a second weekend job at a warehouse just to cover expenses. And for the first time in months, money for formula, diapers, medical co-pays, and even a college fund started appearing in my account. Jerry was working 60 hours a week. And according to his mom, he never once complained about being tired when he showed up for visits. The change didn't come all at once. It built slowly, moment by moment, visit by visit. But around 4.5 months, something happened that I'll never forget. During a handoff, Jerry leaned in and said softly, "Hey, buddy." And just like that, our son's whole body lit up. He turned his tiny head toward the sound of his father's voice and reached his arms out, eager, trusting, innocent. My heart shattered and mended all at once. I watched Jerry's face crumple as he scooped him up, holding him with this mixture of awe and grief. Whatever had passed between us, whatever pain I still carried, our son didn't know any of that. He just wanted his dad. 2 weeks later, Jerry sent word through his sister with a new request. Instead of funneling everything through his family, could we use a co-parenting app? I hesitated, but curiosity won out. While the baby napped against my chest, I downloaded the app and set up my profile. Within minutes, his first message came through, questions about feeding schedules, sleep patterns, routine. I typed back the basics, even attached photos of the formula brand and diaper size. His reply was simple, "Thank you," followed by a promise to read every pediatrician note I'd uploaded. The app organized everything, timestamps, categories for medical info, schedules, expenses. His mom told me later Jerry spent hours studying the app each night, memorizing our son's routines. At the next pickup, Jerry showed up at my door with the diaper bag packed perfectly, every item from my list checked off. For the first time in weeks, he looked me in the eye. He said, voice steady, "I know you may never forgive me. I get that. But I promise you, I'll spend the rest of my life being the father he deserves." And for once, it didn't sound desperate or defensive. It sounded real. I nodded, handed over the baby. Our son immediately grabbed Jerry's nose and laughed. That week in therapy, we talked about growth and boundaries. My therapist pulled out her notes from my first session, 5 months earlier, when I could barely string 2 words together through tears. She smiled and pointed out how far I'd come. Back then you were surviving. Now, you're thriving. She reminded me the boundaries I'd built weren't just about protecting myself, they were teaching my son what healthy love looks like. Her words stayed with me all the way home, where I found Jerry's mom waiting with a pot of homemade soup. She'd been showing up twice a week since the birth, no matter what. Over dinner, she admitted she was grateful I'd given her a grandson, and even more grateful I'd given Jerry the wake-up call he so badly needed. She squeezed my hand, eyes watery, and whispered that I felt like the daughter she never had. The 6-month pediatrician appointment arrived before I knew it. I walked into the waiting room to find Jerry already there, flipping through a stack of parenting magazines. We followed the nurse back together. The doctor weighed our son, measured his little body, checked his milestones. She smiled and said, "He's perfect. You're both doing a wonderful job." For the first time since that awful baby shower, Jerry and I shared a genuine smile over our son's head. The moment felt fragile, strange, but not forced. Afterward, walking to our cars, Jerry mentioned his therapy. His counselor thought he was making real progress. And that night, sitting in my apartment with my baby in my arms, I realized something. This life, my life, wasn't what I'd imagined. But it was mine. The walls were lined with photos of family and friends who had stepped up when I needed them most. The nursery was organized exactly how I wanted it. My schedule flowed around the support system I'd built. Jerry was becoming a good father, even if he'd failed as a partner. And my boundaries made sure it stayed that way. Then came the news I didn't expect. Jerry's sister called, voice bubbling with surprise. Jerry had started volunteering at a pregnancy resource center, teaching expectant fathers about supporting their partners. Apparently, he stood in front of rooms full of men and used his own failures as examples. He told them about the damage careless words could cause, the harm in dismissing what a woman's body goes through. His therapist had suggested it as part of his accountability, but the coordinator said his honesty was striking. 6 months had passed since that nightmare of a baby shower. 6 months since Jerry humiliated me in front of everyone. And yet here we were. Our son was thriving. He had 2 parents who put him first, even if we couldn't be together. Jerry showed up to every visit, every appointment, with consistency I never thought possible. He read every book his therapist recommended, worked 60-hour weeks without complaint, and funneled every extra dollar into diapers, formula, and even a college fund. His family became my strongest allies, no matter what happened between Jerry and me. The co-parenting app kept our communication organized and safe. Therapy helped me process the trauma and rebuild on my own terms. My friends, the same ones who saw me humiliated at that country club, now told me they'd never seen someone handle such a storm with more grace. The life I had wasn't the life I planned. But it was built on boundaries. On growth. On respect that had been earned the hard way. And as I rocked my son that night, feeling his tiny breath against my chest, I realized, this new life was stronger than the one I'd lost. That's all for today, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Today's train wreck is over, but tomorrow's ride is already on track. Subscribe so you don't miss it.